I
Oh,
love stories about Zen masters. How about you?
I love stories about Zen masters. I love
Have
stories about people who are true masters in whatever they do.
on the path to mastery.
Yes.
The one that's intriguing me today is when I open up a browser tab, uh, some saying will come up, and it's almost always awesome. It's some mantra or something, right? And sometimes it just hits you. But today it said, "Empty your cup, Mark." I was like, what the hell does that mean? So I Googled empty your cup
Oh,
and
really?
found out it's a famous story about a Zen master who has a young, I'll say Padawan, but that's not what you call
Hmm.
them, but a young
Yeah, yeah,
Padawan
yeah.
come in and ask him for, the secret of life. And
Mhm.
the Zen master starts to tell him, and the young Padawan starts telling the Zen master, that starts triggering a bunch of stories from the young Padawan. So the young Padawan is talking and talking and talking and talking. He shuts up. The master says, "Would you like some tea?" He says, "Yes." He starts pouring the tea. And he keeps pouring it, pouring it. And pretty soon the tea is overflowing the cup and going all over the floor. He goes, "What are you doing?" He says, "Your cup is already full. Come to me when you have an empty cup." He's Dewey Freeman. I'm Mark Sylvester. We're the Elder Council. And that was the look in my brain when I went, oh, how often have I done that? Where I come into the situation full, I'm not ready to receive. And yet I've asked to be given something.
Mm. When you said when you were telling that particular story, my whole body began to relax.
Mm.
And the idea of an empty cup feels fantastic to me.
Mm.
And I'm wondering, so that was one part. What I'm also wondering, what also hit me was how many people come to me with a full cup and want to try to impress me with how full their cup is
Yeah.
and what
That,
they know.
that's almost always the case.
And
However, I'm going to throw you a curveball, Doc.
throw me a curveball, sir.
What is the thing I want to talk about is not that story. That was a very interesting new thing that I've learned that I will now never forget because it has a story attached to that idea. I can see the tea coming out of the cup and saying, "Come back when you have an empty cup." And that's with me now forever. It was me not knowing what something meant, consciously incompetent,
Mm,
go find out the answer, integrate it by telling someone else what I had learned. That's how my way of integrating is teach that new thing.
absolutely.
Then now it's in my body. And I find, and I think that's about being curious. I think it's about when I don't know something, I can't stop until
So you've
I'm
dug into it.
obsessive. Yeah. Until I understand it. And this week, Traver talked about the four archetypes. And I thought I knew what the archetypes were and how that's going to be a theme coming up, and
Mhm.
they're going to do some talks. And I set about to really understand it, to see Like that's a kind of thing I would like to listen to.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I found in life, for me, I'm always doing that. Like I'm always like I want to learn, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I love it. Like that, the empty your cup is a really thin thing, but I love it when something like the four archetypes, which is just 3 words, and you open the tent to that and you go, good God, there's a whole world here. And rather than go, okay, close it down,
Bye-bye.
I'm backing away real quiet, nothing to see. I just like, sometimes I just rip the thing open and like, I'm in, or oh, I'm just gonna come in. And as I'm saying that, what does that bring to mind for you? Because I've been told that's unusual behavior for me. So not everybody does that. And I'm like, how do you not do that?
So just so that I'm clear, are you saying it's unusual behavior for you, or it's unusual
When I will
behavior?
recount a story like that, they'll go, that's why you're unique, because you will do
Got it,
that.
got it, got it. Are any of the archetypes about curiosity, about finding out,
Yeah, I think they, yes.
like an explorer?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm going to go back to, I don't want to pull up my paper that I read and crib from that, but one of them was about learning. So there's
Mhm.
right, King. I think it's King is the one about always learning, and but I'm could be totally wrong. But yes,
Right.
I what was interesting as I was reading it, I was able to see the aspects of my life and all of them, and I was able to see that for sure, very much
Mhm.
so, and identify with it.
So, um, in your deep dive that you took regarding the archetypes, not, I don't want to dive into what are the archetypes, because I think Traver's actually going to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And just so the audience knows, we had a bit of a pre-discussion that neither Mark or I right now are experts in sharing and the knowledge of archetypes. We both heard of them, we both read some about them, but we're certainly not at that place where it's like we're experts. What was your process of going, oh my God, when you opened that tent
Mm.
door, of being drawn in versus going, okay, there's a lot there, I'm just gonna go have a beer, or I'm going to avoid this in one form or another?
I know exactly the answer. I had, is it clear? Oh, I remember a story you told. Is it clear what the culture is? And culture for me starts with language.
Mm,
Do I understand the language? Like if all the people are speaking a foreign language, it's going to be very hard for me to understand. And foreign
right.
language to me could be the buzzwords if I walk into a psychologist's convention, right?
Totally. Like
Right.
all of the initials and all of the,
Just
yeah.
like as opposed to walking into a room of people who are trying to understand psychology and finding the words that make it accessible to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened to me. I it's about language. I needed to find something I understood. If I spend my whole time in while I'm learning something new, like Googling the words because I don't know what 4 of the words in a sentence mean. I'm fairly well read, so I'm pretty good with my vocabulary is pretty big. But if I stumble into something I go, man, I'm going to spend more time doing that, and I'm going to lose the point
Right.
of why I'm here. And I eventually found an essay that the guy explained. He says, I've heard, and it's kind of funny. It kind of starts off in that same vein. I've heard of these. I didn't really understand it, but I found a book and I read the book, and I'm going to kind of digest what I learned from you, and hopefully you'll get it.
Right.
And
4 pages instead of 200 pages.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is that a couple of different things. One, you said when you walk up to a stable or a corral full of horses, you're looking for the lead horse. Remember that story you told? We had that show. It's kind of like when you open the tent, I'm looking like who's the lead horse in here.
Right.
But it's kind of, think of that metaphorically as what's the big idea here? Like, what's the big idea in this whole thing? That's what I'm searching for. And I wonder how much, when we're talking, we're so caught up in our own shit and buzzword heavy and jargony and insider on whatever it is, that we're not accessible to the people around us.
So a little bit ago, what you just said is a really big deal. A little bit ago, you talked about language. Language is the underlying foundation of every culture in the world.
Yep.
Kimberly and I were at a holiday party last night for a place that Kimberly works, Golden Wellness Center. Wonderful, wonderful people. Golden Wellness Center does great stuff. And I was talking to, they're all therapists, and a lot of them are newer therapists, and was talking with a particular woman, and she had heard about me from, I don't know where. Actually, I do, from a friend of hers who has studied with me. And she said, she asked, what I did, and et cetera, et cetera. And in that process, I said, yeah, I've traveled to numbers of countries in the world, probably 10 or 12 teaching. And her first comment was, well, were they all English speaking countries? And it was like, no, interestingly enough, they weren't all speaking English speaking countries. So we had to find a different language around horses that we could have in common enough to be able to create a subculture within the culture. And so language, your point is so relevant in that what I see is that many times people throw out words that they don't even know what they really mean, to impress or to whatever.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting to me is that you found an article, and I think you mentioned it was like a 10 or 12 page article, which I would love to read, by the way. That made your exploration around the 4 major archetypes for men accessible. And it's like, so how do we communicate in a way that makes us accessible to people?
So I think the answer.
Yeah. Because, and let me just say one. Yeah. Well, one is listen, but the other is, you mentioned if you go in with a bunch of, therapist or psychologist, you're going to go, okay, what the heck is that person saying? What's that mean? What's that acronym mean? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm the same way with tech. It's like, it's like, well, there's this blah, and there's this
Got to
memory.
flush your cash, man.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going, I don't have any cash on me. And so a couple of questions come to mind is, how able are we in general to set language up so that and speak in a way that other people actually really get what we're talking about?
Mhm.
Number one. And number two, what do we do sometimes when we use language that we pretty much know that somebody, unless they're sort of in the same field or in the same group, they're not going to get? And how many times do we use that to keep people out?
So the first question of setting things up so that people will get us and using the language. This idea that language is foundational to culture came to me 20 years ago through a direct experience. In your case, you were traveling and you learned. In my case, we were building these networks on top of a matching engine that we had invented, and the matching engine matched people, right? And what we found was that every group of people we were going to match, like all the executive directors of the United Way, or all the employees at Sony, or all the people, like they had a thing that bound them. But within that, what were the other things that bound them? And if we understood that, we could then build the matching algorithms would work, because they were things that were more meaningful than, we could talk about movies, we could talk about weather, we could talk about your favorite TV show, we could talk about your favorite color. There's lots of things that are general, but we wanted to be very specific. And we found that we had to listen and we had to spend time understanding these people. How did they talk? How did they communicate? We'd read stuff, we would talk to them, and then we'd have our buzzword detector on, listening for oh, what's that word? Oh, that's the, and they look at you like, that's the da-da-da. You don't know what a da-da, dude, I have no idea what that is. But is that an important word for you? Says, oh my God, are you kidding? We've all studied that. Oh, okay, that's good. And so I would get to where it took us about 6 weeks. I'd have about 200 words that were very specific. I just remembered we did one of these for Brown University for visiting professors from third world countries who were all authors at a conference. Okay. Wow. So there's very specific, but they had, like, when we started, I said, dude, once we understand the words, it's going to be awesome. And 75% of them, no clue, but that meant a lot to them. So the first thing was listening, but I think it's backing up from that. It's wanting to know what those words are. Because when you do, then you can communicate. Otherwise, you're just exhale only.
Right. So two things. One, and this is an aside, I don't necessarily want to go down this rabbit hole. How many of the listeners think that communication has to do with talking versus listening? And the place I do want to go, and what really strikes me with what you're saying, Mark, is, what does listening really mean? What's that really mean to you?
So let's let everybody savor that one for just a second.
Yeah, what's it really mean?
And I would have to say that I've had the listen loudly conversation many times, especially when someone
Mhm.
says, please listen to me. But I think
God
where
damn
it's,
it, fucking listen to me.
yeah, right. I want you to be heard. I want you to feel heard. Right. So there's
Mhm.
that. That's different. I think it comes, I've gotten reps in at listening, which has helped me tremendously through improv.
Mm.
Because when I step into on the scene, and now I'm going to interact with, we're going to create something, the two of us, and we're going to build like who we are, what we want, do we love each other, do we hate each other, all of those things, only by listening, because if I come in with I think I I think something about you, and you open your mouth and I'm not listening, I'm just going keeping in my head of what I think, when everyone knows what I'm talking about, then I'm putting my shit on them rather than responding. I'm not reacting. I'm not
Mhm.
reacting. And you can't react if you don't listen. And
Right.
I do so much improv that I'm having to work on that because I'm shitty at it. I'm first to say. But the joy of coming to that with an empty cup
Mhm.
and then listening is fantastic, because their words are a gift to me.
Mm. Say that again. Their words are a gift to me. And just let that sink in. That's a really big deal.
So in improv, we have this concept of a gift. So you and I walk into the scene, and I go, hey, Bobby, looks like you've been crying.
Mm.
Now, we didn't know anything. We just walked up to, I said, hey, Bobby, you look like you've been crying. So now what do you know about yourself? Answer the question. What do you know about yourself?
That I've been crying, my body, maybe that I have some sadness going on. And I might respond as, yeah, I just lost my best friend.
So you accepted what I said. Yes. You didn't say, I haven't been crying, because I could read your body.
Mhm.
And so you accepted it. You yesed. Yeah. And you added some more. You gave me a gift back. My best friend just died.
Right.
And I said, wow, I didn't know he was that sick.
Yeah. And actually, you and him remind me of each other.
Uh,
The way that you
so
and
each
yeah,
thing was a gift back to me that I could react to, rather than me, just that.
yeah.
And if you, I think it's a way to think about conversation, and a way to think about our interactions with people, is that their words are a gift. But we don't normally think like that. But as soon as you do, you're like, oh, now I want to unwrap, stay with the metaphor, what you
Exactly.
said.
Mhm. So allow me, if you will, to expand this a little bit. The way that I think about listening is that our entire body is a receptor.
Mm-hmm.
Most times when people think about listening, it's like ears. It's like, yes, you said, you know, the grass is green. Their words. What I think about is, if anybody has seen the parabolic dishes of, that point to the sky and get all the radio waves, or,
Satellite dish.
satellite dish, or It's like that's sort of how our bodies are. It's
Hmm.
like every we're every bit of listening has to do with energy coming toward us in one way or another. And because that's actually what listening is, voices, our voice boxes create a vibration and the air vibrates and it goes through and hits our eardrums and vibrates. And then that goes into our brain and gets translated. So it's actually a transfer of energy is what's happening. And if we can allow ourselves, our entire bodies to be a receptor, not just our ears, we will pick up an incredible amount of energy coming toward us, and it will deepen and add to the meaning of what anybody else is saying. What's really interesting is on a nerve level, our hearts, our faces, and our ears are all connected. And I don't want to get too geeky here, but there's part of our vagal nerve is actually called a heart face connection nerve. And part of what happens in our inner ear also affects our face. So as we are speaking language, everything that goes on in our face and everything that goes on in our body and everything energetically gets transferred. It actually gets broadcast, so to speak, if you're looking at it from that perspective. So if we can think of our entire being as being a receptor, what that does is, and I just had a flash here, what that does is allow us to literally hear more than just the words. And that a huge part of, and here's this is a little aside, is when we talk about the different archetypes, those are different kinds. And this is my postulation. I'm just putting a few things together here. But each archetype actually is a different kind of a receiver.
Right. So,
or a different aspect of how we receive things.
what I love about our conversations is that the background that allowed us to learn all that from you just now was completely different than the background that I had to learn a thing, and is completely different than the background from my improv coach, who has us stand and we have to look at one another and not say anything and take in the whole body, to your point. Take in the whole body, don't ask no questions. What do you see in their whole body? So to your point, I want to turn my receptors, I want to fine tune the fuck out of that radar.
Yeah.
So that I can, and I'm going to take the time, I'm going to empty the cup, get the radar tuned. So any vibration. So the word that came to me was, I want to allow for an energetic exchange.
Yes.
Now, whether they are conscious or not, that they are emitting energy, the more I can be ready to receive, fine tune, mix all my metaphors up, the better I'm going to be able to look at them and go, you look really sad, or you look really happy, or and so we actually are practicing a new way of doing our improv, where the four of us very slowly walk and just look at each other and really focus in on two of the four of us. Each person does that. And when you think you know what the emotion is, what someone is feeling, without them saying anything, you stop and you go, "You're so giddy." And then the other two look at him and go, he's the giddy one. You know that. And then the other person will say, "Yeah, giddy up."
Mhm.
And then the person who may or may not have been emitting giddiness, but there was something in there that the person saw. They didn't make
Yeah,
it up.
that somebody saw.
Now their job is to triple down on being giddy so the audience can see. So now he's the giddy one. We're now going to interact with him with a series of very short scenes to see what's the giddy guy like at work? What's the giddy guy like at the DMV? What's the giddy guy like, right? But this idea, I love when there's a scientific explanation for something, because we all heard you when you said the words are just sound wave. That's sound waves coming out, hit my ear. And I'm thinking how just amazingly beautiful that system is that works. So why aren't there other waves?
A little bit crazy,
right? And you're saying there are other waves, and
totally.
I'm guessing that the majority A, don't know about it, B, don't know how to fine tune their radar, and C, go, yeah, all right, oh, that's interesting, and just gonna move on. So my question after, did I get all that right? I want to make
You
sure I
got
got
it
all that
all
right.
right. Yeah, you're right on.
Right, we're a couple of satellite dishes in this conversation, right? And so as conscious as you are of emitting, because that's the other thing Coach tells us is like, be more giddy. What is the giddy guy's body like? How does he walk around? What's that? How do you visualize that emotion? This is hard shit, by the way. It's not easy to do. It's really hard. We work on it all the time. So I'm curious, because I love how when I tell a story in the beginning of almost every show, your reaction is to explain how your body felt when you heard it. Because you're tuned into somatic that's who you are. That's at the core of your how you understand. So knowing that optimizing for an energetic exchange is positive for both people and a great way to go through life, how do I fine tune my radar?
Well, here's the interesting piece. You actually have to believe and understand that you actually have a radar.
Okay. So that's first. So I'm there.
That's first.
I am a satellite dish.
Second is Mark Satellite Dish Sylvester.
But there's an operator. There's an operator looking at the screen, right? Thinking about SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, right? You know about SETI, where there's people that are looking at the noise that the universe is sending at us, and they're trying to get through all the noise to find a signal, some faint little something in all of that. And isn't that true? And conversationally, there's just all this shit coming at us, and we're trying to filter out the noise to find the signal. So to the point of
a little bit, yes,
that's that adjusting, like filter out all the other stuff, the archetypes, filter out all the stuff that doesn't have meaning to their particular archetype. Yeah? Right. So how does one who wants to, how do they adjust that filter?
Well, my God, this is so much fun. The bigger we can make our radar, the better. One of my dear friends, who actually no longer alive, was a physicist and at CU, also worked for National Atmospheric Research up in Boulder. He and his colleagues put together a gigantic receptor antenna down in Peru. It covers about 10 square miles. Yeah, it's like crazy. And it's all these poles and wires and stuff. And where, and like literally 10 to 12 square miles. It's gigantic. And when he was showing me pictures of that, I was going, how did you even figure that out? And it was, I mean, basically, it's common physics. You have a bigger antenna, you can pick up more. Our ears are frankly relatively small antennas. Like our little eardrums aren't even, they're not even a quarter-inch in diameter. Well, think about the idea of what happens if you use your whole body as a receptor. So two things have to happen to do that. One, we actually have to be able to live in our body and have a sense of what goes on. Two, we have to actually believe what comes in. So this is the fine-tuning piece. It's like, oh, there's a piece of information that's coming in that I'm actually going to do something with other than dismiss it. And so it's actually moving from a place of integrating receptors and enlarging our receptor area. So when you say something, I do hear it in my ears. I also see your eyes, I see your forehead, I see your face, I see whatever movements there are in your face, I feel the energy. And it's like are people first willing and then able to allow systems that are already in place to be put to use in our bodies? And one of the things that we tend to do in our society is we cut off energetically right here, and we don't go into our bodies, because essentially we've been taught not to. And we could do 10 shows on that. Yeah. So I don't want to go there right now. But it's like, not only is it am I working on listening to you, I'm working on listening to me while I'm listening to you. And that's the fine-tuning piece. It's like, oh, Mark, his face just went in a certain way, and his breath changed, and the way he's sitting, and energetically, it's like, I'm not just picking up information here or in my eyes, I'm picking up information through my whole body. And it's like, if we're not in our bodies, we can't use them. It's like we have a radio with different speakers, and it's like you turn on the one little tiny receptor speaker and turn off 27 other ones, where you're not actually picking up on what's really available to us. So the fine-tuning has to do with opening up my entire system, just like this gigantic antenna down in Peru, allowing myself to feel your entire system, and then allowing myself to integrate from picking up from different areas of my being into something that I can respond to.
And I think the second part of that, when you said I'm listening to what I'm saying as I'm talking to you, you said that right. That's that awareness that, like, my little watcher sits over here and watches everything I'm doing. So I tune into my watcher, who's, watching what I'm doing. And that, another way of saying that is I'm reading the room.
Yes.
right? How is what I'm saying being received? Because if I'm it's not being received, then I'm not communicating. I'm exhaling, right?
Yes.
And so what you're saying is that, and that's what conversation is. That's what communication is. That's the free. It's the back and forth. It's the little bit, add a little bit energetically. And I think we've understood that. I think, and because this is something I've had to learn as well, reading the room is really important. And it is a thing that you can work on. That's a skill. That's not a born trait.
Totally.
That's a skill. We took my two grandsons on a scavenger hunt in San Francisco. There's an app you can get for most major cities in the world that leads you on a scavenger hunt through the city, so
That's
that
so cool.
it's super fun, and you get points, and it's
Hmm.
very, very fun. And we're about halfway through that, and Kimberly said to me, they're bored now. We thought it would be exciting, but it had gotten to a point. She says, they're bored now. She looked at me and says, got to read the room.
Mm.
And was I willing to abandon the scavenger hunt because they're teenagers? They're like, okay, this is great, pops up until when it wasn't. And then,
Hmm.
and how often do we not read the room in a conversation where, oh, hold it, I need to change my language because they're not understanding what I'm saying. I need
Yes.
to, like, maybe even check in. Does that, do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm totally following what you're saying too. And
By the way, that was the device that we don't often use, the check in.
right, exactly. And what a huge part of what people forget about in communication is that if you're not picking up what I'm trying to say, I need to find a different way.
And if you're not listening to how the words are being received, you'll never know that you need to find a different way.
Exactly. And so there it's like, and it's so I just want to add to what you're saying because I love your piece about reading the room. And here's what I want from our listeners. It's like I can imagine men going, yeah, I'll just walk in and I'll work on reading the room. And reading the room also means reading what's happening between you and your partner or wife, between you and your kids. Really, when you're laying in bed next to your wife, you need to read the room. You need to read what's happening energetically between the two of you.
Mhm.
When you're sitting down to eat, you need to read the room. When you're getting ready to go to, like, we had just a very short period of time yesterday to transition from me working with clients and feeding horses to changing clothes to going to this party that we went to last night. It's like we need to read the room and work with that. It's like it's not a lot of people learn how to read the room or get taught how to read the room or get at least talked about how to read the room in sales and you know leadership classes and et cetera, et cetera. All of that is really, really important. But can you read the room when you're about ready to fall asleep
Mm.
and your partner's laying next to you and they're about ready to fall asleep? Can you read the room then? Can you read the room when somebody comes in from outside and they're cold? Or I think where you're living now, if I'm following the weather, you guys are getting like tons of rain.
More
What's
coming.
that? And more coming. And like when you walk in from the car and you go, "Ooh," and and you're shaking it. Can you read that with people? And um and it take go ahead. Some just happened.
So reading is like physically. So the room walks in.
Hmm.
Someone walks into the room, they book. Do I look at the book? Do I open the book up? Do I read it? Do I care? I mean, we can take this analogy a lot of different ways. Like reading the room, like, are you paying attention? Is your radar lit? Do you want to read the room? Are you all is your cup so full you can't read the room?
Exactly. So that's like you do have to have an empty cup to be able to read the room.
My friend, I sure love Saturdays.
I do too. I have to admit, every Saturday I get up and I look forward to this. And I'm rushing around because I have so much to do with feeding, et cetera, et cetera. And then I sit down and I go,
Thank you. I love you, man.
love you too.